how you prioritize self-care in your life and what that looks like for you.
This is a wonderful question. And I can share that I haven't always prioritized self-care. Since starting my business, what I do, I have everything is scheduled through Calendly. Usually my appointment, people just have a link, depending on which appointment they schedule it. I only start my first appointment at 11 a.m., not earlier than 11 a.m. And this is my time. My mornings are for me. So after I drop my kids at school, I go to the gym. I do me time. I do whatever I need for myself.
That is so smart. I love how you put that in your calendar and block that out. I'm like, this is my time. Oh, that's so good. And when did you start doing that? You said you haven't always done this. When did this become evident that like, I've got to block this out in my calendar to make sure that I'm taking care of me first?
Yeah. So I think, as I said, I'm transparent. So when I have 4 children, ages between 14 to 20.
Wow.
So they're grown up. They're somewhat self-sustained. They are never really self-sustained, but
they're getting there.
Yeah. I don't need to watch them constantly. Let's put it that way.
Right.
When they were younger, when they were babies, toddlers, it was really difficult for me to prioritize me. I was always running around, working. And back then, right, there was no such thing as remote, right? I had to commute. To commute every day.
Yeah. And get the kids to wherever they had to be, whether school, daycare, whatever that was.
Yeah. So those years were very, very challenging for me with self-care. And I always talk about the gym, because for me, it's like one of the things that are really important for me is my well-being. Yeah. And I see like exercising and eating properly as part of taking care of myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And exercise also helps me emotionally. So it was always important to me. But when I had very young children, it was very difficult. And I tried several things that didn't really work out. I tried signing up to a gym and going like 5, 6 a.m. That didn't last because I'm not a morning person, and I was forcing myself to do. I was forcing myself to do something that was completely against my nature, and it worked for only like maybe 2 months. Yeah. So, we did crazy things. One of the things we did when we used to live in the US, we did a home gym. When they were very little, I remember we had a basement, and we allocated part of the basement to a home gym. So we bought some machines, and I still have this image vividly, as me and my husband are like on the treadmill or like elliptical or whatever, and we have toddlers like walking around us, right? I mean, that's what we had to do in order to get some exercise.
Yep. I understand that so completely.
Yeah. But as they got a little bit older, what I did, I remember that I decided one day, okay, I'm going to go and sign up to, back then I wanted to start Pilates. So I signed up for Pilates classes, and I said to my husband, okay, Mondays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m., I'm out of the house. I'm going to Pilates, and that's it. I'm not going to cook anything. I'm not going to do anything related to the kids. That's me time. And it was actually, it wasn't so much for him than for me to kind of make that announcement. He was super supportive. It was more me. I was my own barrier because I felt guilty all the time. Like, how come I'm just leaving everyone? Everything will collapse if I'm away. So.
I know. Isn't that the myth that we believe? I love that you pointed that out, that it was you, because I've had the same issue throughout. Like, my husband's like, go do what you need to do. That's fine. I don't care. I had to get out of my own way and my own head of mom guilt. I'm like, no. Everybody's actually happy to have me go do this because they know I'm going to be better off when I get home. When I've filled my cup, I'm going to be better to be around. I'm going to be able to show up as my best self. But I think it's so interesting that we have this idea inside of our head, and so many times if we just communicate the need, if the people around us are like, great, so glad to hear you say that, go do that.
Yeah, exactly. So I said that's kind of was the milestone that I said, well, I have to do this for myself.
Yeah. And you said that, and I think you said something really key there, for yourself. You knew it was important for you. The great kind of result of that is that you're also better for everybody else as well. But you knew, and I think that's where it really has to, for us to make it a priority, we have to understand that A, we're worth it, and B, that we need it, we're valuable enough and worth taking the time. And most of the time, many of the times, the people around us that love us and truly care about us are going to support that. So, but understanding we're worth it. So I'm so glad you pointed that out because that is so important. I think there is such a great trickle down effect when we take the time to do that. We get rid of this notion that it's selfish. We understand that, wait a minute, hold on here. If I first take care of myself, everyone wins. First and foremost, me, and then everybody else around me, because I'm just the best version of a healthier version of myself when I do that. So I'm so glad you pointed that out. And I remember the gym in the basement days. We had an elliptical, and I remember these kids hanging all around. I'd turn on the Disney Channel. Go watch the Disney Channel. Mom's on the elliptical. So I can totally relate to that. And then trying to keep the kids off of it. One of my kids got her toe caught in it one time. She got on it. And it was, we got her out of there, but she never got on again. It was a lesson learned, but then it was like, oh my gosh, now the elliptical's a hazard. Like everyone stay off the elliptical. And her sister saw what happened to her. Like, don't worry, we don't want to have that happen. So it was a painful lesson learned, but yeah, those days were wild. So I can totally relate to that because we had crazy time. We had 3 girls. All 2 years apart within 4 years of each other. So you've got a 4th one on top of that, which adds a whole other layer of just busyness when they're that age. But even understanding like, okay, because I'm not a morning person either. And my husband is. And many times throughout he's like, just get up and walk with me. Just get up and run with me. If you just go and get it done, you'll be so glad. And I'm like, my body hurts when I try to do this. I hate doing this at this time of morning. And that does not give me the emotional release that I need either because I don't have the proper attitude going into it. And so I had to do the same thing. I had to this does not work for me. And if I'm going to get something actually worthwhile out of this, then I need to do it at a time that I want to be doing it. And sometimes we have to make with our busy schedules, we got to squeeze things in sometimes. But if you really want to have it be authentic to you, I'm so glad you brought that up because I relate to that. Confidently setting boundaries. And what I mean by boundaries is just those places where you need to have yeses or nos, where you're not giving your time away to just anything, where you're making sure you're engaged in a healthy way in relationships, in your schedule. So talk to me. I love how you stated, I told my husband 6 p.m. Pilates, these 2 times a week, I will not be available. That's a great example of communicating a need, an expectation, a boundary. So talk to me about that journey for you.
Definitely. I mean, boundary setting is so important. And I see so many women, including myself, not putting boundaries and then stressing out, getting to burnout, right? I mean, it happens so much.
Yeah.
So I would say it goes it goes hand in hand with prioritizing self-care. And again, we talked about exercising, but it can be anything else.
Yeah.
And setting up when you are available and when you are not, and what you can do and what you cannot do.
Yeah.
And I think it goes both to work and home, and it's all related. Because typically, I mean, you'll notice that if you're not able to set boundaries at work, you're also not going to set boundaries at home.
Yeah.
I'll give you like the silliest example. My kids are super, super spoiled. And, you know, as a mom, I try to keep them happy and cook them meals and all that. But they're actually, nowadays it happens more than it used to. I say, well, I'm not cooking today because I'm too tired or I don't have time. And figure out yourself, whatever is in the fridge, go figure this out. Good luck. See you later.
I love that. Like, you can do this. I know you can.
So obviously when your kids are little, that's not going to work. But what can work is like figuring out, okay, maybe you're going to buy some prep food, or, you know, I'm going to make it easier on myself.
Yeah.
You're not going to be a bad mom if you're going to buy something pre-made. I mean, we have this notion we have to do everything. We have to be super moms, and we really cannot do everything, right?
No.
So it's okay.
Yes. And we got to let ourselves off the hook on that, you know, and really give ourselves grace and take that kind of superwoman shield off and not do that to ourselves. Everyone's going to be just fine. But I like how you talked about how if you don't set them in one place, you're not going to be setting them in another. It really is a habit. And I mean, you know, you are a woman in the tech industry, in engineering, where so many times for many years you were the only woman in the room, and you're really working and helping women now adjust to that, to know how to show up in that. Your work really focuses on that. Did you feel a different kind of pressure boundaries wise because of being the only woman in that sometimes? Or was that harder for you to set boundaries there because there's that pressure to feel like you have to prove yourself when you're the only one there?
Definitely I felt pressure, especially, you know, when I was a young mom. Yeah. Because again, back then, the work culture was going into the office. All the men around me, they stayed late at work. They didn't have to pick up their kids from daycare. And I know that we talk about, well, they don't have to be the ones, you know, women don't have the ones picking up the kids. I wasn't the one picking up the kids, to be honest with you. And because my career was really important to me, and I saw the biases that existed for women that, and I'm not saying that that's the right way necessarily, but that's what I did. Sure. So I was just like any other man. I stayed later at work and tried to prove myself worthy and be like the other men. But it doesn't have to be that way, right? Because as women, we can do things our own way. I would say that since I started working remote, in 2016, I started working fully remote. Things have changed to the better. And also it depends obviously on the organization and the culture. Sure. And I started noticing a huge shift about, first of all, the importance of balancing the me and family time over work and the flexibility and being able to be very open about it. Like, well, I'm blocking my calendar now because I have to go to a meeting at school for my kids. And it can be even at 10 a.m. And I was not ashamed about it. I just put it on the calendar. And it was perfectly fine as long as I do my work. And I was flexible enough to compensate for that. So I think it also depends on the corporate culture you're at. And I guess the work culture has changed over the years. I think to some degrees to the better.
Right. What do you think the biggest change has been since your 20s to now?
In the work culture?
Yeah. In the work culture for women in tech specifically.
Yeah, I think that the change has been that self-care is something companies talk about and prioritize.
Okay. Yeah.
Not just for women, by the way, but also for men. A lot of companies, for example, give parental leave also for fathers, not just for moms.
Yeah.
And the whole notion of, people don't want to commute anymore, and there's flexibility in the working times, and people are working globally and they work across the globe. And that means that there doesn't have to be necessarily like a 9-to-5 culture. You can work in different times.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as you're getting your work in. Yeah. I think that's huge. And then you had the whole pandemic piece play in, and then the working from remotely became even more the bigger thing, because I think it helped organizations to realize there's a lot of people that can do this well. And this also works really well for families. And guess what? They're getting sometimes more work done and better quality work done because they don't have the pressure of having to get to the office, get the kids here, go to the doctor. They can really build that in and really work around their schedule when it's best for them. For some people, that can be, 9:00 at night after the kids have went to bed. You sit down and finish your report. I mean, you got to set boundaries around that too, but it just gives a flexibility that helps it work with your family too.
Definitely. And I think you mentioned a very important point. You have to set boundaries to yourself. Otherwise, you work yourself off completely, right? I mean, because there are no boundaries. I mean, you can work from anywhere. When I started my career, there wasn't even internet connection at home. So, and there was not laptop. So I couldn't literally
everything
work outside of the office.
Yeah.
So now, obviously, we can work from our phones, and we can basically do everything all the time. So it's even more important to set the boundaries and define for yourself when you are working and when you are not working. And I'll give you just an example. Now, obviously, I have my own business, which actually comes with benefits, but also it can very quickly become like I work all the time.
Yeah.
And my husband, we just had a holiday, Passover, and my husband was asking me, hey, how come, and I have an important talk tomorrow that I'm going to give to a company, because sometimes women ERGs invite me to give talks. And my husband asked me, well, why are you not working on your women ERG talk? And I said, well, we have a holiday. I need some time off. I'm going to be able to catch up, when we are back.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would just work all the time, 24/7.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And that is something I have dealt with too, as I've started working from home the last couple of years. And it started during the pandemic when my organization was working from home. And then I started working with my own network now. Full time in August of 2022, I switched over and left that job and went to this full time. But then I realized I had to create boundaries within that, where I had to go outside my house, like physically go for a walk, leave the house, and like, okay, I'm leaving my work day behind. And when I come back in the door, my house becomes my house again, and I'm home and I'm not working. But it is tricky because it's so accessible on our phones and so many things. We can do it from so many places. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that's the new boundaries challenge is dealing with, okay, this has a lot of benefits to it. And also, I got to be mindful of the fact that I just don't work myself to death because it's so accessible to me, and creating that boundary between home and work. So thank you for that, because I think that's one that people are going to continue to deal with and we'll have to continue to talk about and figure out ways to make your brain switch off from I'm in my office to now I'm out and now I'm in my home.
Definitely.
I've got a designated area where I record and I have my desk, but I can still carry my laptop all over and work stuff. So when I'm done with work, I will bring my laptop back to this desk. And once it gets on this desk, if I've moved it around during the day, then I close it up and I'm done working. And that's something, so just figuring out that thing, I think that helps you. What helps you? How do you mark that timeline of like, okay, I'm done working. Now I'm home.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know if I have a very good answer to that, but typically, and it varies, right? I mean, it varies on the days.
Yeah.
First of all, I really try to make a priority to not work on weekends. I can.
Sure.
But the thing is that I have a husband, I have a family, and I want to spend time with them.
Yeah.
And during the week, we're all busy and they are at school and my husband is working. So I'm trying, for example, to prioritize not working over weekends. Although for me, I mean, it doesn't matter, to be honest. I mean, I can work weekdays, weekends, doesn't matter much.
Right.
I try to spend some time, not always it's possible with, with my family during the week. Again, some days I work late. Like today, there are many days that I actually work late because I work a lot with the US. And basically, I don't know. I mean, it happens kind of naturally to me that I feel like, okay, this is enough for today. I'm going to turn things off and the rest can wait for tomorrow. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm ready to be done. Yeah. And I think listening to your body too on that, all right, it's enough. It's time to move on. And I going back to that time you set for yourself during the day, so important, especially since you're working with people in the US and time zones are behind. You can take that chunk in the morning and be dedicated to that and know that that's time that really can be yours without any conflicts in probably a lot of the work you want to do too. So that sets up really nicely from a boundary standpoint. Thank you so much for all of that. So helpful. So good. Taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health. Talk to me about, for me, there's a lot of connect points. I can really feel it in my body when I haven't moved through, processed, made time for something to be worked out. You talked about earlier how working out, physically going to the gym, working out helps you emotionally. Talk to me about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I see the direct link between physical and mental health. And for me, again, every person is different. So don't feel like you have to sign up for a gym. But means. Whatever works for you. But for me, I like to get out of the house, to go to the gym. And this is like the time where I feel I can disconnect. And I'm not at home. And I'm seeing other people. And I'm spending time working out and doing something that I enjoy. And find something that you enjoy. I mean, I think this is important. It doesn't have to be like a punishment, right? I have to work out because it's healthy. That doesn't work, right? I mean, otherwise it will become a chore. Yeah. So you want to find something you enjoy. And even if you say, well, I don't like anything, find a friend, go for a walk and talk with her. I mean, find something. I'm sure that there is something you can do, even just walking every day for 20 minutes, listening to a podcast or to music or speaking with a friend. Maybe that's all you need. I mean, again, every person is different. So I feel like when I do that, it helps me de-stress because sometimes I'm stressed out. Like, okay, I have my own podcast too. So I have a backlog of episodes that I need to edit. And sometimes it stresses me out. Okay, I have so much to do and I have this talk and I have this and I have this. And just saying, okay, now I go to the gym and I don't think of any of that. I just focus on my workout. I put some music and that's it. It really helps me to de-stress.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, for me, when I do that, it creates space for new creative ideas to come up too, because it clears things out. I'm able to move that through my body, move that out, do something I enjoy. And then a lot of times when I'm done, all of a sudden, all these new fresh ideas will, and I've got to find a place to write them down because I've made space for that. You're laughing. Is that something that happens to you?
I can so relate to that. Something funny happened to me. So first of all, my strategy is my phone. I have the notes up on my phone. Every time an idea comes, I immediately put it on the phone. But I was working out at the gym. And during the workout, I thought about, I got an idea for a post for LinkedIn. I post on LinkedIn daily. And I just said, it was so funny. I sat down and I started typing so I will not forget, the idea. Just kind of scribbling some ideas. It just took me a minute. It was so funny. So I could very much relate to what you're saying.
Yeah. And it's so funny. It's like this, I'll be in the middle of whatever it is. It could be my walk. It could be my HIIT workout. It could be yoga. And then all of a sudden I'll be like, and I do the same thing. I've got notes up on my phone and I did it just enough to remember it later so that when I go back to it, I can, get back to that thought. That's so funny. So it's so important to make space. And I'm so glad you brought up find that thing that works for you. I mean, we'll get to this at the end of the podcast, but I always ask guests, 5 activities that nourish you. But I also use that in my public speaking and when I'm doing presentations, when women are having a hard time figuring out what that thing is. They're like, I wasn't an athlete, or I don't like to exercise. Like, what are 5 activities that nourish you? Think of those 5 activities. Which one of those can you incorporate into a day and make that part of your nourishment, your self-care? And 9 times out of 10, there's always some sort of movement in there. Or if it's like lunch or coffee with a friend, I'm like, what if you picked up lunch with a friend and walked to a park? I mean, we're always able to get to a point of like, oh, that's something I could do. And so, if you're having a hard time with that, ladies, think of those 5 activities that nourish you and see which one of those, if you aren't incorporating any of them, which one of those can fit into that box. But find that thing that really connects with you so you can get that full benefit out of it, because there is so much power in making space for like, all right, I'm going to plug in my favorite music. I'm going to do this workout. I'm going to enjoy this time, breathe in the fresh air, go to the gym, whatever works for you, to make space for yourself, to reconnect with yourself, and then make room for that new creative energy to show up in whatever it is you're doing. So thank you for that. So, so good. You are doing this in your work, and I'm going to give you a chance to talk about that in a minute, but how we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically. This is what you do, really, in my opinion. So talk to me about this work and what made you decide to start your own company and go this route?
Yeah, and it's very much related to what you said, living my life unapologetically. So I come from a middle-class family. My parents believe that, you working as an employee is the best thing, the safest thing. We had my aunt they were self-employed in the fashion industry. And I remember, the conversations at home, how it's not good to own a business, how risky it is, and how it's good to be an employee. And even more so, my parents work for the same employer. Each one of them is a separate one for the whole career. So obviously the generation difference is huge, right? I mean, I wouldn't even dream of working for the same employer. It's not even possible, even if I wanted to, but And I remember they were even concerned that I was moving jobs. Like, oh my God, why not stay?
Isn't that, it's such an interesting generational change. I had the same experience. I'm like, I bounce around all the time. I'm like, it's not the same world in the work world as it was. So I know what you mean about that.
Yeah. And so I guess just doing what you want, regardless of what others think you should be doing. And I guess at some point in my career, I realized that, first of all, I'm passionate about women, and especially women in tech, and even more so women in technical roles, right, in engineering. I have a lot to give. I get a lot of positive feedback from women I'm coaching, and said, wow, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to do just that. And I decided to take the leap of faith. It wasn't easy, and it's still not easy. And I was absolutely terrified. To be honest, I was absolutely terrified. I still have good days, bad days, right? I mean, it's not a smooth path. It's not like everything is rosy and, works like a charm. But I'm doing something I'm passionate about, and I am living my purpose. I have a mission. I have a purpose in life. So I guess I chose that path because I felt like that was the right thing for me. That was the right timing. I already accumulated wealth. My kids are older. This was just the right thing for me to do at that point of my life. And I just decided to do it despite, My parents were not really happy about it, right? For them, it was weird. Like, why would I do such a crazy thing? Leaving the corporate world, getting paid so much to go being working for, who knows what. And I had to take some cuts, right? I mean, it's not like magically I get...
Not the same.
Yeah. So I guess took me some time to explain to them that I respect your opinion, but it's your opinion. And I'm going to live my life the way I want.
Yeah.
So I guess living unapologetically is just believing in what you want and how you want to live your life without necessarily fulfilling the expectations of others around you from yourself.
Exactly. That's said so well and ties beautifully into the expectations question that we'll revisit that in a minute. But did you see, you saw a need and through this for women to have you take your experience that you've had in the tech industry in engineering. Is this something you wish someone would have had for you? And so you decided you would offer this to women? Or what made, you said you felt called to it, but I'm guessing that it's like, boy, it would have been nice to have a voice like this in my life when I was starting out in tech or in that. Did that play a role?
It did, but it wasn't the major thing. I mean, yes,
okay.
I wish I had, mentors and coaches more. I had some, but I wish I had way more.
Sure.
Especially when I started out.
Yeah.
But the thing was that it was happening organically, both as a leader, right? I was leading engineering organizations, and obviously most of them were men. Women were scarce, and I was trying to kind of find women and help them, advance.
Yeah.
And also when I started mentoring, I started volunteering in different organizations, and I saw the need, how much how much they need that support.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it. And I got a lot of good feedback. So kind of the whole thing led to this, but it took several years. It wasn't like one day that it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you talk about that, because I think so many times when you move into doing work like this and you hit some success points and people are like, oh, wow, that's so great that you were just able to transition. I'm like, whoa. This has been a work in progress. It may look overnight to you, but let me tell you that it started here and we've gotten to here. But thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's so important. I love how you talked about that it felt like a calling to you and following that passion, because that is difficult. You were in a good paying industry, very successful, and to walk away from that and have the courage to follow that dream and that intuition of yours. I think that if more of us could do that, we would find ourselves more holistically happy in our lives rather than just staying in this thing because of expectations, because of the, income, all those things. And you also too had the, the good fortune and privilege of being able to do it for many years and build up a point where you could make that change. But it's still difficult. It's still leaving that security. It's still leaving that I know when the next paycheck is coming. But you saw that need, and what you're able to do for women and supporting them now in this area, I think is so powerful, and helping them pursue unapologetically. So thank you for that work. Thank you for your willingness to do that and follow that dream, and for sharing that information. And ladies, if you're like, oh, I want to work with her, I'm in tech, or I want to know how she does this, all these resources are going to be listed on our website when this episode drops. So you're going to be able to figure out how to get a hold of Limor and how to talk to her and work with her more and get feedback from her. But thank you for sharing that, because it just fits so perfectly into the unapologetic talking point that we talked about. I knew we were going to have a great opportunity to visit that. The importance, and you did this, the importance of setting and coming back to your why and your values in everything you do. You felt this in you as these opportunities started presenting themselves. for you to lead and volunteer and help women, you really followed like, wait a minute, this is a value of mine. When this process, did you know that? Was it like, wait a minute here, this is something is clicked. Is this something you've known for a while, or was it something that came up as you became a leader and had the opportunities, I guess, present themselves to show up in that way?
I think it happens as I grew as a leader and when I started volunteering. I'm a true believer in giving back. I still do it to this date.
Yeah.
And I think when you give back, wonderful things happen to you. And in general, my approach is to do things without expecting immediate returns. And this doesn't just goes to volunteering, but in general, my philosophy is like,
sure,
okay, you do something, you help someone, whether it's at work or, just on your life, and you don't necessarily expect something immediately in return or at all.
Right.
And you will be rewarded 10 times. Like I started volunteering, I will not forget it. Like a company approached me, hey, will you be willing to mentor engineering managers? And I say, yeah, absolutely. And obviously no pay. And colleagues ask me, hey, they approach us too. And I, why would we want to do that no one pays us? And I'm not judging them. And I said, well, I understand you. But for me, it's like naturally, it seemed like the right thing to do without expecting anything in return. And I got so much in return. I got so much experiences. I learned so much from this. And then eventually it led me to what I'm doing today. So I guess just say yes to opportunities and don't expect from everything you do, there will be something tangible.
Yeah.
I like to think of the marathons, right? Of the long haul, like with the podcast, right? When I started a podcast and people start asking me, how do you make money out of that? And what do you get out of that? And I say, well, I just enjoy it. And I'm able to amplify the voices of incredible women, and I meet incredible women, right? Like yourself.
Yeah.
And yes, I don't know if eventually if it will generate revenue for me or not, or it will generate business or not, but I'm just doing it because I feel like that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that completely. I hear you 100%. I started this out of I saw a need, and I saw a place where I could start conversations that I thought could help women and give a framework to get us talking about these things we need to do to properly care for ourselves so we can show up as our best authentic selves. And when and with no other intent, then I think I can make a difference here. I think I can take what I've learned and what I know and make a difference, and we'll see where it leads. So I understand that so intuitively. And when you do that, when you follow that why, because it's not for everybody. The women that taught, the people that came back to you and said, why would you do that? You're not getting paid. That tells me that's just not for them. That's not that doesn't fall into their values. And that's fine. Everybody has a different set. But I love how you talked about, don't get attached to outcomes. I mean, go out, follow what it is you feel called to. And obviously we have to figure out ways to pay the bills. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying, you don't have those things in line. But in general, when you're following your why and your values and trusting that inner knowing that's telling you what it is you should be doing, trust that. And things really do roll out and come. I mean, I would have never imagined when I started this in July of 2021 that it would become what it is now, and all the different opportunities and the incredible women that I have met, like yourself, all over the world. I mean, I would never imagine I'd be having conversations with women in Israel and India and France and Sweden and Australia, and not to mention all over the United States. I mean, so yeah, I love that you mentioned that piece. And when you're following that piece, that thing that you're called for and called to, it just brings so much richness to your life. So don't be afraid to listen to that, and don't be derailed by other people's expectations within that. Make sure you're staying, really close to what it is that you are feeling called to, and being unapologetic with that. So thank you for sharing that, because I can relate to that so much. And it's really so important if we can get confident in that and like, wait a minute, I'm feeling a nudge here. I'm feeling a call. I'm going to follow this and we're going to see where it leads. And yeah, and the amazing things that can come when you give yourself and you give your time, it is really, it's really incredible. You've already really addressed this, but we're going to revisit it again. You said this so perfectly when you were talking about, communicating with your parents and different generations about the choices you were making work-wise, but living out of your own expectations versus others. You were very solid in that communication. Have you always felt that way in terms of expectations, or is that something you've grown into?
Absolutely not. I was a very obedient girl, and I wanted to be a good girl and to meet my parents' expectations of me. I was always a good student, and teachers loved me, and I pursued a career and all that. So it wasn't always that way, but I evolved, right? We get better over time, right? We get better, wiser, stronger. So that evolved. That evolved eventually. And what I knew when I was 20, I didn't know anything. Like I didn't even know what I wanted. So
yeah, isn't it true? Isn't it amazing when you look back? You're like, wow, how did I do that? We kind of muddle our ways through and figure it out. You just keep taking that next step forward. Would you say being especially early on in your career, when being one of the few women in the room really helped you understand or define expectations? I would imagine early on, it's like, okay, I got to try to balance this, showing up as my best self, not disappointing anybody, showing I belong here, but also not leaving myself or being someone that I'm not. Was that a challenge early on?
I don't know if to say it was a challenge. I felt I felt comfortable with the way I am, and I didn't feel necessarily that I didn't feel necessarily that I have to prove myself all the time. I think the greatest challenge was when I became a mom, based on what I shared, right? And I felt like I needed to be like the man and to work, same hours and so forth. But other than that, I never felt different. I never asked for less, right? From different roles and working on coolest and more interesting technology and getting paid. I always asked for what I wanted, and it paid off. It paid off.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing you said. You always asked for you wanted, and it paid off. So many times we're afraid as women to ask for what we need or what we deserve or what we've earned because of the narratives that are out there. And we have to quit believing those things. They're not true. They're just old, tired narratives, and go forward confidently. And don't be afraid to ask for what you need, what you want, what you've earned, what you deserve, what you're smart enough to do, what you're capable of. I love that you said that. That's so powerful and so important. Yeah. And I'm sure that's something that you're able to share that with other women now in the work that you're doing, of like, don't be afraid to do that. Don't hold back. Be confident in what you know and who you are. There's so much power. If you show up in a room confidently, people can tell. People can read that. When you show up knowing your voice deserves to be heard, that you deserve a space to take up space in there, that people can sense that off of you. Has that been your experience too?
I'm a true believer in that. And I think the mindset is super important. And this is usually one of the things that I work with women in their mindset and how they perceive themselves. Because if you don't believe you're good enough, no one else will. And you have to first work on your self-worth and how you see yourself. And one thing that I do help women that I wish I have done better is being more strategic about their career. I was not always strategic because, as I said, like I didn't really know all the time what I wanted. So I kind of, said, okay, I'll just show up. I'll do a good job. And I guess I trusted the system to notice, me and promote me or whatever. And it didn't work that great always. Yeah. So I guess one of the things that I did learn the hard way is that you really have to be strategic about your career and pursue what you want, be very, very proactive and transparent about what you wish, and work with the system, kind of with your manager and HR and all that to really get there. And I wasn't always doing that.
Yeah. And I think strategic comes into like the cultures. When you're talking to companies and organizations, if you don't see a lot of women around or women in management positions, that might be a clue that this might not be the place for you. I mean, sometimes you can be that person who changes things and shifts gears, but also pay attention to the whatever work culture you're looking for, environment. Does it match up with where you want to go and what you want to do? I think sometimes as women, I got to take this opportunity because I might not get another one. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes we sell ourselves short. Like, wait a minute, is this aligning with where it is I want to go and how I hope to get there? I had a great conversation with Kara Tuttle-Bell on a podcast episode this spring that talked about that strategic piece and how to approach that. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because that's not something we were told in college as women. We weren't given that kind of notion. And so there weren't a lot of people talking about that, mentoring about that. So I think that's so important. It's probably something that's really helpful that you're able to share with women that you're helping now.
Definitely. I mean, I wish someone told me that when I started.
I know.
Like, okay, build your roadmap, figure out what you want. And sometimes you don't know, but you kind of learn as you kind of go.
Sure. And you can adjust. If you don't know, that's fine too. But when you do, okay, now I've got an understanding. Is where I'm at now aligning with that, or do I need to, make some shifts here? I think that's so important. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really helpful. And I think it's something that women need to hear and just be reminded of as we figure all these things out. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. That's all those parts of our lives, all those decisions we've made, roads along the way that we've chosen. Some we love, some we don't. But getting okay with all those pieces of ourselves, because I think that's really necessary for us to really show up loving ourselves well, valuing ourselves, whatever words you want to use around that. You got to accept all the pieces that go within that. We haven't all made decisions we love. I've talked about today. Wish I'd been more strategic, those kinds of, wish I would have understood this earlier about, expectations and whatnot. But also kind of being able to take that neutral stance and like, listen, I did the best I could with where I was at the time and getting okay with that. So talk to me about your layers journey and your ability to kind of look at your life and be like, okay, I didn't love that, but I get why I did that.
Yeah, I'm really not focused too much about looking backwards and beating myself up or kind of, judging myself or thinking, why did I do that? I'm not really focused on that. So I guess that's not much in my mindset. More so I'm looking into what are the things I learned along the way and how can I improve? That's more my mentality rather than, I regret doing. I don't have regrets. I mean, things happened for a reason. They happened. And as you said, like I did the best I could based on what I knew and what I thought back then. There's no point in dwelling into that. Rather than looking maybe of what have I learned and how can I either improve or help others do better than I did.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think it's that learning and being curious. So ladies, if you catch yourself being judgmental, switch it to being curious and switch it to being learned, because I think that helps you take a different, more helpful, proactive, moving forward mindset about those situations. I love how you said that. That's so good. And it's just that acceptance and also, okay, I learned this and I won't do that again. And I'll be able to share this with others moving forward. And I can help them avoid some of those missteps or obstacles or barriers that I didn't know about or didn't really know how to navigate. So thank you for that. That's a really great way to approach that. So good. In summary, in Living Out Feel, Finding Empowerment, Embracing Layers, which is the title of our podcast, how has you've done this really well. You've articulated this so well. How has this affected your relationship with yourself as well as your relationship with others?
I think that it all goes to accepting myself the way I am and loving myself, and it's all related. And I learn to love myself more every day. I think this is so important. I know to some it sounds narcissistic, but it's not. Because when you love yourself, when you accept yourself, when you appreciate yourself, the more you do that, the more others will see you in that light, appreciate you, and love you in return.
Yeah.
So I really practice that. And as you said, being less judgmental, we all have this inner judge coming up and showing up. I mean, we have that, but trying to, I guess, mute that judge as much as possible, be more compassionate and loving ourselves the way we are with all our quirks. We're not perfect. I'm not perfect, but I accept myself the way I am.
Yeah. I love that. I love what you said about how when you show up that way for yourself, it invites others in. And I think it also teaches others how to treat you. They see how you think of you. They see how you engage with you. And they know, okay. And you just carry yourself differently. And it really has that trickle down effect. And so thank you for mentioning that, because I think that's so powerful and so important. And again, I go back to that judgment voice comes up, replace it with a curious voice and see to help you shift that mindset. And you've done that really beautifully. Thanks for sharing that. We are down to our rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
5 activities that nourish me. So I already said going to the gym, listening to music, listening to podcasts, reading, and also I love wine. So I love going to wine tasting, drinking wine at home with friends. Wine is a big part of my life.
And you're in a region in the world where there's probably a lot of really good wine, I would imagine.
Definitely. There are a lot of good wines here. And obviously we have a lot of imported wine from worldwide. So I love wine.
Yeah, that's a fun one. Thank you for that. All right. And 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
5 words. I want to feel happy, healthy, strong, confident, and empowered.
Oh, so good. So good. So good. All right, Limor, I want you to take a couple minutes here. Tell us about your website, your podcast. All these things will be on our resources page on our website, but take a moment to share how people can connect with you.
Definitely. So I always say I have a website, but I want to invite people to follow me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
My handle is Limor Bergman. Just find Limor Bergman Gross. Do that search. You'll find me. Follow me or connect with me. I post every day. And that's, I think, the best way for you to get to know me. Because as I said, I'm authentic.
Yeah.
And I'm transparent. So I'm sharing everything. I'm sharing a lot of personal stories and all that. So definitely be there. And I also share my episodes of my podcast. So you can also get the updates there. Every Wednesday, I post a new episode. So I interview incredible women and they share their wisdom. So I feel grateful that I'm able to meet incredible women and amplify their voices. A lot of them, even though they're very successful, they're not used to speaking publicly. And, I had many of them that, I want to re-record. I had several that wanted to record again. So I think just having the privilege to give a woman as successful as she is the stage to speak up and feel confident about herself is so rewarding.
Yeah, and powerful and important. And I think those kinds of conversations that you're having, that I have, that I'm having, that we're having, that's what changes the narrative for women in the world in terms of, of how we show up in the world, how we're perceived, what is expected. I think it's that coming together, amplifying voices, taking those spaces you have and sharing them with other women. That is really where it is. And I'm so glad you brought that up. Limor, thank you so much for being with me today. Thank you for the work you do in the world. I've so appreciated this conversation and getting to know you a little bit more. Field Podcast audience, all these resources she talked about are going to be on our page on our website. Go to embracinglayers.com, hit that resources page, look for Limor's episode. It'll all be there, and go follow her and learn from her and the wonderful women she's talking to. This is how we move the needle for women, ladies, by coming together, having these honest, authentic conversations. Limor, thank you for being a partner of that in the world. I appreciate you so much. And I'm going to let you have your night. It is much later there for you. It's a little after 9 o'clock at night there for you. So we want to let you have your evening. But thank you so much for taking the time and sharing this time with me today.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Great. All right, Field Podcast audience, feel empowered. Be kind to yourself. Get curious. Feel good about that voice and those intuitions and follow them and believe them, and have a great week.